order. Welcome, everyone. Has everyone looked at the agenda? Do they have any items they would like to add at this time? If not, we'll move on. First of all, on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the August 27th meeting and the September 25th. Do you want to do those individually or both together?
We're going to do them together.
Okay. Entertain a motion to accept the minutes of those two meetings, August 27th and September 25th.
I'll move them.
Joel moved. Second.
I'll second.
Mark has seconded. Any discussion or corrections to either set of minutes? If not, I will ask for all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
Mike is abstaining. Okay. Motion is carried. Thank you. It doesn't look like we have a county administrator's report. I'm sure that they're still super busy, crazy. And I can't say as a would want their job right now. That's for sure. So Mark, I think you're the next agenda item, over target request.
Okay, great. I'm not going to speak long, so I thought it would be good to have an update on the over target request for the study by Southern Tier Network and Fujitsu. And so Anna agreed to attend today to provide us an update on where that stands in the process. Katrina sent out information that Anna had provided us a couple hours ago. So you can look at that now or later. It just gives you a lot of the bread and butter information about the project. But anyway, I'll turn it over to Anna.
So that only went out a few hours ago. It didn't go out yesterday. Was that?
Yeah, I apologize. That was my bad.
Okay. No, that's fine. So the information that you all got was the full OTR that typical wonky my style, as Shauna knows all too well. It was very thorough and had a lot of background about STN, a lot of background about really explaining, what this study is, as well as what the requirements would be, the deliverables by the county, by STN, and by Fujitsu. So it was broken down into the three of them. It also included a link to the MOU that was signed by the original 5 counties that did the first study that this is basically an add-on to, as well as the outline of the 5 deliverables. The study, there's a second link that also includes the detailed proposal from Fujitsu, and that one's I think about like 15 pages, so it is a handful, but it's quite interesting, so I highly recommend it. So just in a nutshell, I wanted to make sure that everybody understood, what the proposal is. So STN, they came here before, and thank you so much for having them, Mark, to come and present. In particular, the CEO, or not CEO, the director, because it's a nonprofit, Steve Manning. The idea is, as many of you know, some of the challenges that we face with broadband is that the system we have in place is that taxpayer money, both from the state and the federal government, go to private internet service providers to build lines and operate and maintain those lines and provide the service through those lines. And so it basically is the government outsourcing internet service and the infrastructure. And part of that then is a lack of a really strong ability for oversight and enforcement on where lines get built and when lines get built and the quality of service that is provided through those lines. So the whole fundamental basis of what this study is exploring is to really capture where the gaps are in service, both in total service or where they're underserved. And I want to note that the cutoff of what they're defining as underserved is anything under 100 megabytes per second. That is very unique at the state level or at the federal level. Anything under, if you meet 20 megabytes per second, you're considered high-speed broadband. But they recognized in this day and age, and particularly as we've seen in COVID, you have anything less than 100 megabytes per second, and you have a person who is on a Zoom call doing a work call, and a kid who is trying to do a Zoom call for school, and you've got someone who's trying to do telehealth, and you've got three computers going with video at the same time. There's no way you're going to do that on 12, 15, 20 megabytes per second. So I appreciate that that's the cutoff that they're looking for. And then part of the study is to then outline what a middle mile and last mile fiber optics layout would look like. So to do the engineering design, as well as outline the cost of capital cost and operating costs to maintain, and the business model that they recommend. So it's a very extensive study. And this will provide information sufficient for us to, as a county, determine what exact relationship we would like to have with STN moving forward. And it will provide the information for STN to then be competitive for state and federal grants to actually do the build out. So why is this so significantly different? What it does is it takes away the ownership of the physical wires from the private companies, so that the physical wire infrastructure would be owned by a nonprofit, and they would broker lease agreements with the private companies, the internet service providers, to provide the service through those lines. So it's called dark fiber in that the company STN, the nonprofit, wouldn't be lighting the wire themselves, but they would be doing contracts with the ISPs. Now, the reason also that this is important is that although the traditional business model for ISPs is to own and operate the wires, and this is removing the ownership from them, there are many small ISPs that don't have the capital or the infrastructure to build out wires themselves, which has resulted in many cases of a monopoly of individual internet service providers to areas, because they are the only ones who had the capital to do the build out. And once they own the wires, they can sort of dictate the quality, as I said. And also, they're certainly not going to lease to other internet service providers in the wires that they own that taxpayers paid for. So it really changes the game, and that's what I'm looking for. The one other piece that is important is that the idea is to connect into the already existing over 500 miles of wire that STN already has built. Why is this important? For two reasons. One is that they have spent over 10 years getting in the black, which they are now with the existing system that they have. And that is important because that stability is what they can work off of as they build new systems, new wires, which will have, of course, several years to get a return on investment. And that's how economies of scale work, that you lean on the parts that are profitable in order to take on parts that are temporarily unprofitable. So it is much more stable than if we tried to do it ourselves as a county. And that's why, again, I appreciated this. The wire systems that they would, the design layout that they will put, offer will be to build into their regional network. And it's important that I note this, because if we were going to ask Fujitsu to do a study where we wanted them to create a system to make the county completely independent, where they laid the wires would be different than where they lay the wires if they consider us as part of a regional approach. I do not think, and the county did not think, that it was valuable to isolate ourselves. One, because we have no interest in being in the business of running an internet broadband system. We're not in the business of doing that. But two, this will allow us to capitalize on the economies of scale. The last thing that I will say about that is that we can more effectively and efficiently tie into and loop into their systems to create redundancies. And that is a part of stabilizing physical internet systems. Because they already have wires in place, the way it's designed will be to create those redundancies, not only through the county, but in connection to their existing wired system. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody had those updates. Technically, the system is would be nonprofit, would be owned by the nonprofit STN, and it would be municipally affiliated. So the board is comprised of the county members, and so they have obviously a huge say in the decisions that are made by the nonprofit. But it is a 501c3 entity in and of itself. So once we have all of this information, it's outside the scope of this study, but we will have to figure out exactly what relationship we want with STN. So for example, do we want to invest capital into the project itself and become an official member of STN? That will give us certain benefits. For example, in the crazy off chance that sometime in the future, STN closes its door, the physical wired system would revert, the ownership of it would revert back to the members, for example, as just one, tiny, security. There's also the members who have invested in capital in have also received discounts. For example, they paid a third of the cost or a fourth of the cost of this study compared to those who had not invested capital into this system. The STN nonprofit is not in the business of making a profit. That is not their focus. That is not their interest. And they've been very, very clear about that. So any of their profits, as is the case with nonprofits, they're not in the business of making a profit. They reinvest into the system itself. The decisions they make of those reinvestments are done in collaboration with their board, of course. So just to give you all a bit more of a background about STN and the nature of this study, the study total cost is $80,000. But you'll see in the OTR, it also lists a whole list of responsibilities that the county would need to be responsible for, and we have to agree to when we sign this contract with STN and Fujitsu. The county has agreed to take on the responsibility of doing that work, and it will take about 20% time of one of our planners. But we looked at this in comparison to the entire work plan, current work plan of our Department of Planning and Sustainability, and the Commissioner of the Department of Planning and Sustainability, Katie Borgella, really felt that this need was competitive with all of the other needs that we had on our work plan for the planning department. And it was really important, her input and prioritization of this for her planners was a very important factor in the support that other legislators were willing to give to this OTR. So the idea is that one of the planners would work as the point person for the county for the study, and would go to all of the meetings with STN and Fujitsu. And what I wanted to pitch to all of you is the possibility of creating a subcommittee, a broadband subcommittee over the next year, because it'll be about 8 months for this study, and that the planner could meet regularly with the broadband subcommittee to keep you all updated and get input. My suggestion, so far we've had, and I want to specifically thank all of those municipalities who have contributed to the cost of the study. That has been a huge help, certainly a help in getting this over the line, and that's Newfield, Enfield, Danby, Caroline, the town of Ithaca, and the town of Lansing as of last night so far. I know others of you are still considering it. And I deeply appreciate that. It'll be a huge help. This is clearly, it is a draft budget until November, but positive so far. And my colleagues are aware that there are many of you that are still looking into this to contribute. My suggestion is that the subcommittee be made up of those municipalities who have financially contributed to the study. So that's my one suggestion for you all if you do move forward to create a subcommittee. And that's about everything. I know I just threw a ton out at you. I have been eating, breathing, drinking, and sleeping broadband nonstop for 4 months now. So not as long as Dan Lamb has, who also knows all of this stuff inside and out and probably could speak it in his sleep also. But I'm catching up slowly but surely.
Does anyone have any questions for Anna? We do have a couple of minutes yet.
Yeah, Anna, my broadband froze up when you were speaking. Did you say 8,000 or 80,000?
80,000.
Okay, thank you.
So the total study is 80,000 and 6 municipalities have contributed 5,000 each. And all the deliverables of the study are in the OTR that I sent out. There are 5 very in-depth deliverables in that study.
Very good.
A couple more questions, Anna. First of all, municipalities may want to know, where's that $80,000 going in terms of study? You say the county planning department is working on it, or the county planning department's already on salary. So where's the money going? Who's going to be receiving it?
That's the contract with Fujitsu. So Fujitsu was contracted by STN to do the 5-county study. They have already finished that deliverable to the 5 counties. That includes Schuyler, Chemung, Steuben, Yates, and Tioga. This is to replicate the deliverables that they did for those 5 counties and extend it so it also includes Tompkins. I can tell you that that Broome has gotten wind of what we've put together here, and they contacted me because now they're considering it as well. And I just mailed my OTR to them and the Fujitsu proposal. So this may be catching wind, hopefully, in the whole region, which would be really lovely because that will just continue to strengthen the regional network. And to be honest with you, I'd love to see the ISPs not have the monopoly they've had for so long. It's sort of a exhilarating feeling. So this is a contract with Fujitsu. That 80,000 goes to them for their work. You'll see that the 5 deliverables are quite extensive. I know, Dan, you have all done this in Dryden and are aware. It's expensive to do this data collection and work.
Where's Fujitsu based?
I do not know.
Okay.
I just know that they are the company that worked with STN up to now. And I saw the deliverables that they gave and was sufficiently impressed with their work.
But they're out of the region somewhere. They're not local.
I don't know.
Okay. Secondly, and this would be if a system that STN put together were existing in these various municipalities, I presume they would in certain places compete with existing service providers. For example, in Enfield, Hafley Cable already serves Enfield Center. I presume that STN would be running cables down the same roads.
They could be duplicative. Hafley, and which is not a bad thing. That creates redundancy is stability. That is a mantra in this arena. But they do work with Hafley. They have a pretty good working relationship. Hafley both build some of their own network because this is the way the system has always been, that the ISP both built their wires and they provided the service in those wires. What this is doing is changing the paradigm. We have to start somewhere. There are some places where wires will be duplicative, but what is important with this is that the regionality of it will create stability that we currently don't have in this patchwork that we have of like a pocket here, just like you said, the village has coverage and then the outside doesn't have coverage. And over here, we've got another service provider. We have like 15 service providers in the county. That's the paradigm that we're trying to change. So yes, it will create some redundancy for some of them, or in some cases, they may network in with some existing cable systems. Most likely they will build their own, but it doesn't preclude Hafley from having a contract with STN to be the ISP that provides the service through STN's wires. And in a way, it will actually increase Hafley's ability to expand their service through the entire county. And that is the last thing that I will say really quickly is that as I said, a lot of service providers cannot build their own wires. If that is taken out of the equation, then a lot more of the service providers will be able to compete to provide the service through this regional network of existing physical infrastructure. And that is also something that they have found, that it will significantly increase the competition, which improves the service that's provided and the cost that it costs us. So, we're the ones who are going to win in the end. Maybe not all the companies, but they'll have to rejigger their business models in some cases.
Yes, Mark, go ahead.
I just want to say, so thank you for that very clear explanation, Anna. And I did have a chance to look at the linked Fujitsu document that you provided in the email. And it really, I did find it really helpful in understanding the scope of what's being offered, which I found very reassuring. So if people have, it's a few pages, but it's not that bad to get through, and it's very clear and explanatory, and the deliverables are what I found very compelling. So thank you.
Yeah, a lot of pictures and graphs. We like pictures.
I had a weird one. Do we still have time, Betty?
Yeah, I still got a couple of minutes. Yeah.
Okay, I know that, and this may be a complete misunderstanding of the technology and everything, but I know that TCAT just got a grant for a big fiber trunk up to the data center. And it made me wonder if this should be, if there's any grounds or rationale for coordinating these efforts, or if this represents any kind of an opportunity.
No, they actually are already coordinated. So they got ARC funding, which is federal funding for that trunk. But they do not have any interest in building or operating the wire. So they have been in conversations with STN to possibly build and operate the wire, and even potentially own the wire. It depends. I know TCAT is looking at different business models for their own personal revenue possibilities. But ultimately it might be worth it for the community that it just be, handed over to STN. STN could have been the applicant. So what happened is, based on the way the ARC grants were designed at the time, STN could not apply because they had won an ARC grant the previous year for wires they had done. And so TCAD, now IAED, applied as the applicant, and only after the round was completed did they change their protocol, and now STN could have applied, but it's at least allowed for more wiggle that STN could be the contracted agency to do the build out and operation. Okay. So it's all under negotiation.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Anna.
Sure, I saw George had a...
You got 2 minutes, George.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Anna, I think this has a number of great potential possibilities in the region, and I really thank you for this work, because I think you've done a great job. Can you remind me has the city ponied up?
No, and actually, I connected with Duck, and he was going to connect to you, because that would be, I think, a huge statement for the city. And I do think that it would be a benefit for the city, because it's going to increase competition. And that is, right now, for example, in the city, I pay $70 a week, $70 a month for just cable and nothing else, just internet and nothing else. And I've talked to others that have this level of competition that are created by this, and it has significantly reduced costs even within cities. So I think that there's potential for benefit. And Irene Weiser was the one who created the original template resolution, and I'm happy to share that with you. And that was it included the $5,000 contribution. It would be a huge help.
Thank you. I'll bring that forward to council.
Thank you, George. A huge thank you.
Thank you, Anna, and for all. We appreciate all the time you have spent on this, Anna. It shows.
Thank you. And I can't wait to do this with all of you. This is a true intermunicipal collaboration, and it's wonderful to see.
Thank you
Very exciting.
very much.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks, Anna.
Bye.
All right, our next item on the agenda is Matt Yarrow from TCAT. Hi, Matt.
Hi. I have a presentation. Should I try to share it? I don't know
Yeah,
if I
I
have
think Katrina
privilege.
probably can help with that. I'm not sure.
I will make an effort to share it.
Aha, yes, voila.
Voila. Okay, great. I will try to run through these fairly quickly because I understand time is limited, so that we can have time for questions at the end. The main reason that I'm here in front of this group today is primarily informational. TCAT is now in the middle of our 2020 Transit Development Plan. This is a once-in-a-decade planning process that could result in major changes to TCAT's system and service. The reason I say could is because if it turns out that we're getting a lot of feedback that what we're doing is good the way it is, potentially there won't be major changes, but this is an opportunity to really rethink things and to have the public have some significant engagement with TCAT and with the consultant that we have on this project. So let me just run through some slides if it'll let me. Okay. Just before we get into the TDP, we're currently running close to full service. I think it's somewhere about 90% of normal. Service will be reduced somewhat as Cornell goes on winter break at the end of November. So stay tuned for service changes just after Thanksgiving. And our ridership has been going up slowly, and we continue to abide by our pandemic policies, which includes limited number of people on buses, mask usage, disinfecting buses on a daily basis, etc. So for more on that, check our website. And now to the TDP. So it's basically a comprehensive review of the entire bus network with an emphasis on both performance and coverage. So the primary goal is really to tailor the services to the demands, to better use TCAT's resources and ultimately to increase ridership, but also accessibility for all residents of the county. I think it's important to mention accessibility. A lot of times we can increase our ridership just by putting an additional bus across Cornell's campus, but we really want to be there for members of the community, especially in this time of COVID-19, where we have a lot of people that don't have other transportation options that may be, essential workers or who need to get to essential services. And our focus has been on making sure the service is there for them. So the objectives, oops, it says DTP, that should say TDP, sorry. But we, where possible, we want to clarify the system so that people who are coming in and out of the community can really readily understand what our system is, where the routes go, how to find out information, and how to ride. We've done a lot of work in the last years with other mobility providers. So, we have good relationships with Ithaca Car Share, with Bike Walk Tompkins, with Gadabout, and others in the community that are working on these types of issues. So I think going forward, we want to be planning for the best multimodal connectivity that we can and open to other service models such as kind of first mile, last mile, or on-demand services. And again, here at the bottom, ensuring equitable, accessible, inclusive transit service. Right now, we're kind of here at point number 2. So this is our first public engagement period, as that's a part of this process. We're looking to gather basic information about what people want out of their transit system, where they want to go, what's working now, what's not working now, and any crazy ideas they may have about where they want the system to be, or what they want TCAT to work on over the next 10 years. The consultants will then go back and look at the bus network itself, look at the schedule, service planning, and we'll come back with a couple scenarios. And then there will be another round of public engagement and feedback where we're trying to get the community engaged in looking at those scenarios and telling us what they like and don't like. So it's like a more specific round of engagement. And then finally, hopefully by next summer, we'll be moving on to plan finalization. And then it's up to TCAT to really adopt and implement some of the recommendations that come out of the TDP process. So far, the consultant has done a lot of kind of background demographic research, looking at TCAT's data. I guess I'm going to kind of go quickly through this so there's time for discussion or questions. But I did just want to mention that they looked at several dozen planning documents that relate to transportation in Tompkins County and kind of pulled out the salient points, pulled out what the county, Cornell, the city, other municipalities have said about what they want transportation to be like in the county. So we're kind of using this as a background, kind of contextual information for the TDP. And then the consultants have done a lot of demographic analysis. So they've looked at population and employment density in the county. They've looked at age information on racial makeup of different areas, census tracts, car ownership and transit users. So obviously in areas where people either don't have a vehicle in the household or have fewer vehicles than adults, we would expect those areas to, we would expect them to ride more, and we want to be sensitive to what their needs are. The consultant has looked at activity on our existing route structure. So we've looked at boarding and alightings. They've done an analysis of looking at transit demand and supply. So the supply on the right is really, the number of trips over the course of a week that TCAT is actually providing. And on the left is the estimated transit demand. And that is like an index that includes population. Sorry, did somebody say something? Okay, I'll continue.
Could you just a second, please?
What was that? Yeah, I haven't seen the map yet, but apparently Paul and Dave at the wastewater treatment plant, they're putting a map together, and apparently there are 11 manholes up there at TC3. So as soon as I get that,
I'm not sure this has to do with TCAT. Can those folks that are talking?
Did I lose you?
Oh, no. I heard somebody talk.
Oh, I was had a Zoom in the background. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Okay.
So,
I gotta wait.
All right, I'm going to try to continue here. Thanks. So yes, the transit demand index includes things like job density, residential density, low-income populations, transit dependent, or those people that don't have cars, and students, which seem to be some of the major drivers of transit ridership in the area. We've also looked at a social vulnerability index. This comes from the CDC, and how that relates to our bus routes. We're also looking at our bus amenities, and with particular attention to, do we need additional hubs that allow transfer between routes other than downtown, which is our primary hub right now. This is just showing TCAT's ridership has been around and above 4 million rides up until this year. This year has been a challenging year. And we've also looked at route productivity, and here you can kind of see by route the number of passengers per hour. And there are real differences between, some of the campus circulators, urban routes, and rural commuters.
What price they're going to charge for that?
Michael Murphy, can you please mute yourself if you can hear me?
I mean, if it's $100, $200, it's no big deal.
The host can usually mute them.
Finally. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Just some additional information. We also keep track of our on-time performance. And last year, this is kind of what it looked like by hour of the day. You can see that the PM peak was kind of the most challenging time for us due to the traffic on the roads. Currently, right now, we're well above 90% on time, probably like 95%, just because traffic has been down due to COVID. And so we want to hear from you. We would like to hear from, members of TCOG, but also your constituents. And there's a lot of ways in which we can make that happen. First of all, we have a team of transit ambassadors, 7 local folks that have been selected because, they kind of represent or can serve as liaisons with a diversity of communities in Tompkins County. And the lead ambassador is Naomi Krim, and this is her email. So if you have particular individuals that you know about and they may need a little extra help, or they want somebody to reach out to them directly, going through the Transit Ambassador Program would be ideal. We're also planning a bunch of focus groups. We're going to have 3 rural rider focus groups starting next week, which are kind of dividing up the county by route. So, and then a variety of other focus groups you can see here. We're asking if you want to participate, or somebody who does, you can either email tcat@tcatmail.com or Patty Poist at pp1@tcatmail.com, and we'll get you hooked up with the right Zoom information. The online interactive tools, this is something that is really new to us and really exciting. And I would hope that each of you could look at this at some point. We now have online live some participative tools that include being able to map suggestions about bus stops, about bus routes, or desired destinations. And there's also kind of like an ideas board where people can put their ideas about certain things and have a discussion. And finally, there's an online survey. So that all of that is live now. And after the presentation, I'll stick that link in the chat so you can go look at that directly. TCAT staff are also offering office hours. We'll just be on a Zoom, and anyone can just join and talk with us about what's on their mind. And so finally, I guess this ultimate slide, final slide here, just shows all of the ways that folks can engage with us around the TDP. And I'll just stop there and see if there's any questions.
Anyone have questions for Matt?
Matt, this is Katrina. Joe Wetmore, we're having audio problems with him, but he wanted me to mention to you that he said, can you mention to Matt that all his focus groups are aimed at people who ride the bus? Why no focus groups of people who do not ride TCAT?
Great question. We have had a discussion around that. And actually, if anyone has ideas about how to reach people in that demographic. So the challenge is, I guess, with non-riders is you kind of want to interact with people who are interested in the service, who may ride at some point in the future, and who care about what the positive impact that transit may have for the community. I'm not exactly sure the best way to try to find those people and pull them into a focus group, but we did have that on our list as one of the focus groups that we want to have. We just haven't organized it yet, and would really appreciate any suggestions about, how to do outreach around that. idea.
I have a question.
Go ahead,
Yes.
Joanne.
How do we get a hold of this PowerPoint?
Well, I can send it to you. And I think Kathy has it.
Matt, this is Katrina. I can go ahead and send it to
Oh,
TCAT
okay.
members.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I got a question.
This is Mark. And I guess my first question is, on the Transit Services Committee, I see how you guys struggle with, meeting demands of the community and faced with limited resources.
Yeah.
And so I guess I know that you have this innovative first mile, last mile program that's looking for ways to enhance rural ridership.
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering, it's sort of putting things back in your lap, but I'm wondering, do you have any general ideas about where there's an opportunity for enhancing service to the community, or what would be needed for that?
It's a great question. Obviously we started this whole thing and we went out to bid and selected a contractor before COVID hit. COVID has thrown a curveball in this whole process. We're going to have a period, I guess, of rebuilding, and it may be a while before we get to some of the recommendations that come out of this process. However, things like the first mile, last mile, or on-demand service, and if you haven't heard about that, the service is being offered in the Lansing, Etna area on weekends only. It's our Route 77, and it is on demand, so you can use an app to request a ride. It's a pilot. It's partially funded through NYSERDA, and we're really trying to get experience to see what works with that. I think in terms of the TDP, we would be looking at that model and seeing where that fits, either spatially or temporally, a little bit on the outskirts, or obviously meshing with, but on the edges of the fixed route transit system. So in other words, I would prefer not to offer something that's going to compete with our fixed route transit that we already offer, but where something like a first mile, last mile, or on demand could extend the service into areas that have little to no service now, or at times of day where we just don't see it as financially possible to offer, fixed route service with a big bus. This could be one of the options on the table.
Okay.
Thank you. We have time.
Yeah.
Yes, George, we have time for one more question.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Matt, quick question. Are you still planning on moving your headquarters out of the city?
Yeah.
And 2, are you still thinking about converting to electric buses? And 3, I'm talking about my neighborhood specifically. Are you considering purchasing smaller buses that can get around narrow streets a little better than the big buses?
Wow, 3 good questions there, George. Starting with the first one, we have essentially paused most of our activity that is looking at building a new facility for the time being. We wanted to have enough work done so that, potentially in the next year, if there's like a federal level bill that for infrastructure, I guess if we can put ourselves into a place where we can be close to shovel ready, then that option is not necessarily off the table. With COVID and the decreases in service, some of those real pain points operating out of this, the facility that we're currently in, have been eased somewhat. But if we are ramping service back up, and as we transition to electric buses, A lot of those issues well, they're still there. They're just not as urgent right at this moment. So I would say that we haven't totally given up on that idea, but it's kind of more on pause for the time being as we understand the longer term impacts of COVID. As far as the second question was electric buses, we just had a site visit from Proterra, the company that's supplying the first 7 electric buses. We're actually getting them a little earlier than we thought. It looks like March of 2021. So we're doing work on our facility right now to install chargers and other associated equipment. It will be interesting to see how that whole process goes. Very new technology to all of our staff. And obviously, there's not a lot of space where we are right now. These chargers are large. A lot of them are actually going outside of the facility, and then there'll be a dispenser on the, in the interior of the facility that will allow us to charge the buses. So that's a work in progress. And then as far as smaller buses, this question comes up often. There's 2 constraints, I guess I would point out as to why in the past, and COVID may change things a little for us, but why in the past we've often opted for larger buses when we've had a chance to do a bus procurement. First, the FTA doesn't allow us to have 2 fleets for the same type of service. So for fixed route, we can't have a large fleet and a small fleet and interchange them throughout the day. They consider that a waste of federal monies. So we have to size for more peak demand. So that's one part of the equation. What was the other that I was going to say? I think the other part is that in setting up our service, we have a lot of interlines. Some buses are out in service for 16 to 18 hours a day. And over that period of time, they'll transit many different types of routes. So they may be on a Route 53 that has, 12 passengers. They may end up on a Route 10 that has 55 passengers. It's part of how we create the schedules. We may be looking at more smaller buses in the future, though, as a response to COVID, and as we can maybe create a fleet around a different service delivery model, which would be something more like on demand. So going forward, it's not totally out of the question that we would have more smaller buses. Hopefully that answers your
Thanks
question.
a lot. Yeah, that
Thank
answers everything.
Okay, we are up to the next item on the agenda. Mark, you're on.
Okay, and yeah, great. I just, we need to call attention to the fact that we will need a new vice chair next year. So we are putting out a call for anyone interested in serving as the TCOG vice chair. So Betty is in her last year as co-chair. And so, and then Joe will be stepping up as a co-chair next year. So, so we need a vice chair next year. So here's the call for people who might be interested.
And it is a 3-year commitment, 1 year as vice chair and 2 years as co-chair. So at the December meeting, we would be looking for any nominations. You can either nominate yourself or nominate one of your friends. Okay.
Great.
Any questions?
Oh, I have one question. Since we are, most of us only elected for 2 years, how does that work if you don't get reelected?
Well, we have never had to address that problem, but I guess we would face that when we got there. Either that or possibly the person who replaces you on your specific board would take your slot. I don't know. We'd have to face that when we got there.
Yeah.
Good question, Joel.
Hopefully it won't happen, but it could. You know.
Yes, it's very possible. I've been on my village board for 20 years, so.
Yeah.
Now, subcommittee reports. First one, water quality. George.
Okay. So I attempted to forward notes from our meeting to everyone. Did everyone receive those notes?
Yes. Yep.
Okay,
They
great.
got forwarded to us.
Good. How about that? So I'll just be very brief and then you can ask questions if you want. Let me get to my spots. The IO, the Intermunicipal Organization for the Cuyahoga Watershed, has some good news. They're having discussions with the Finger Lakes Institute to contract the services of Seneca Lake Watershed Manager for 1 day a week. Cuyahoga Lake does not have a watershed manager. That's something that we've seen a need for a long time. So this is a step in the right direction, and it will involve a $16,000 commitment. And I'm not sure how that's exactly paid for. I think it's paid for by the participating municipalities in the Cuyahoga Lake watershed, which is not all the municipalities in the Cuyahoga Lake watershed. But they're also working on that issue. The Water Resources Council has completed the boat cleaning pamphlet that we've been talking about. I have not seen it myself, but it's supposedly very handsome and very useful. And Lynn Leopold was tasked with distributing it this fall, and she's taken it to a number of places around the lake. And when springtime comes and people are getting ready to put their boats back in, we will continue that distribution. In the city, Roxy Johnston talked about trying to make the different sources of municipal water more interconnected. And that would mean connecting Bolton Point with city water, Cornell's water supply. I think right now Bolton can supply the city, but the city can't help Bolton. But we're working on that. And also water testing in the city's new water plant is kind of not exact, because the places where we test the water are far from the plant. And so right now we kind of guesstimate what chemicals to put in the water to counteract certain things like manganese. So the amount of these materials we use could be lessened if we got a monitoring device much closer to the water plant. And that's one thing we're working on. And then we talked about our county's wetlands mapping, and Darby at the county has done a lot of work on this, and different municipalities can use information if they want to create rules for how close you can get to this type of wetland area, or how close you can build, et cetera, et cetera. We have this material, and she would be happy to present it to TCOG at some point next year, not before the end of the year, if you would like. That's all I can think of right now. Any questions?
George, is that information about the wetlands available now?
Yes, it is. It was actually completed a couple years ago.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
You mentioned in your notes that the county is defunding the CSI in 2021. What does that mean?
Well, I think I was lying about that because initially it was not included in the budget. I guess they had to, like the city has had to do, they had to reduce the budget for each department.
Oh, and George just froze.
Oh. How about now?
Okay, we got you again.
Okay, thank you. So it was a temporary thing. And I guess the county, Shauna may know more about this than I, the county has ponied up some extra money so that CSI will not be eliminated. So I was once again telling a lie.
Thank you.
Yeah, that funding was restored. We're also, it appears that we tried to have a vote and then the terms changed. And so we will also have another vote on the climate action coordinator. And I believe that will happen Monday afternoon. We're going to vote on that single issue, and then we're going to vote on some suggestions for how we're going to handle our tax cap. And everything else, let's see here, the community outreach worker, we voted to reinstall into our budget. I'm thinking of just some things. Of course, the broadband. Again, thank you all for the municipalities that contributed to that. I think that really helped with the buy-in for my colleagues in voting for that. It was very helpful to have some outside funding for that so that the county didn't have to pick up the full 80,000. Let's see here. We haven't had too many contentious, knock on wood, issues with our budget. And I'm hoping that we will completely be finished with that Monday afternoon.
Thanks, Shauna.
Sure.
Let's see. The next one is energy. Rod.
I hope none of you have sharp eyes and saw the combination to the safe when she was unlocking it. So. First, something non-energy related, and I came on late, so you may have already talked about this, but I just want to mention that if there's anyone who's looking at 5G or being approached by Verizon or other carriers about 5G, we'd be interested in knowing about that. The town and the city, the villages of Cayuga Heights and Lansing had a meeting yesterday to see how we might coordinate, how we might jointly have a conversation with a lawyer who specializes in this. So just let me know if anyone else is being approached and wants to be in the loop as we share information about 5G. So on to energy. So we're still, as you know, we're focused on community choice aggregation. We're still in an educational mode. We did 2 more webinars this month in October. Early in the month, we focused on the participant experiences of the town of Geneva and a representative of Westchester Power. And then, yes, I guess yesterday, we had another presentation, why energy transformation can't be outsourced, and that was focused on CCA 3.0. All of these are available on through Cornell Cooperative Extension's website. If you can't find it, let me know, and I'll make sure you can find where they're posted. It's been really helpful working with Terry Carroll from Cornell Cooperative Extension, and Irene Weiser has also been very involved. And it's actually been gratifying. We've had really good turnout at these webinars, both from energy committee members, other elected officials, and certainly there's still folks who had been part of a TCOG subcommittee 3 years ago focused on CCA, and they've become very engaged again. So it's a nice group of folks. The next step is that Terry, Irene and I are going to meet next week to talk about some next steps and bring it back to the energy subcommittee. I think there's definitely interest in trying to move forward. It's a question of at what level. I think some folks also participated in a presentation that Jewel did on community scale renewables in New York. We know that there's a strong connection between CCA and community solar that keeps coming up as a potential connection to explore. So I think we're educating ourselves, and I think we're ready now to figure out what the next steps are and what municipalities might be interested. Any questions?
Thank you, Rod. Very complete. Appreciate that. Next, let's see. Mark, energy planning and preparedness.
Sure. Well, I don't really have much to report. Our committee hasn't met in a while. We'll probably, I guess I'd recommend that we meet soon. We did the one action item that everybody should have done from, I believe it was the August meeting, where we sort of put forward our action items is to the adoption of the resolution in support of the state to provide a funding mechanism to support rural emergency services. And we asked each municipality to adopt that and send it to the state legislators. And then that was also an ask for the county legislature to support that. So that's all I have at this point. So I don't know if Rorden may have something to add or.
Thanks, Mark. I'll just very briefly mention something that I mentioned on our call this morning with Jason Molino. Probably most of you who are on the call heard it. I think that certainly the county and the municipalities, but maybe this is as good a forum as any through TCOG to do it as well, should start to have a conversation about additional stress on first responders in outlying municipalities, depending on how the city of Ithaca is forced to manage their budgetary constraints and their staffing needs. In particular, what I'm seeing just twice in the last week, we've had a couple of incidents in the city of Ithaca where every available law enforcement agency assigned to the region, so we're talking about 3 deputies at any one time, and 1 or 2 state troopers out of Troop C in Dryden were all in the city of Ithaca backing up IPD, which leaves, in the case of Trumansburg, we were the only law enforcement agency between Waterloo and the city of Ithaca with anyone on staff at that moment. So those are the kinds of unintended consequences of budget crunches as well as staffing shortages. And something I haven't heard anyone else talk about is how that's also going to stress ambulance companies, because as you see some of the desire, some of it very well founded, some of the desire to have certain types of emergency calls go to ambulance and medical rather than law enforcement, that's going to strain Bangs, which in turn is going to strain Trumansburg Ambulance, Dryden Ambulance, Groton, Cuba Heights, and so on. So how we coordinate all of that outside of just saying, well, emergency response and 911 will dispatch whoever they can find. I think some greater level of coordination is going to be needed. I thought it would take a year to 18 months for this to become an issue, but we've seen it twice here in Trumansburg in the last week. So I think maybe we shouldn't wait the 18 months.
Thanks, Rorden.
Yeah,
sure.
Okay, and transportation, Bob Lynch.
Yes, the major development I think that's occurred since our last meeting was there has been additional city consideration of that controversial West End couplet plan that would have rerouted Route 96 traffic in a 1-block stretch of Buffalo Street. West Buffalo Street would have diverted the westbound traffic to West Court Street and perhaps made the Buffalo Street section one-way eastbound. That was discussed at 2 successive City of Ithaca Planning and Economic Development Committee meetings and was subject to input from the community on the City of Ithaca's website. Most of the comments were negative, and as a result, I think it's safe to say that that plan, as far as the city is concerned, is more or less on hold at the present time. It was not on the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda for last night's meeting, but the last meeting we had in September, there was a decided negative opinion of it. And I got the impression that the city is putting that on the back burner right now. I don't know if there have been further conversations with DOT. Perhaps George has some input on that.
I think you're right, Bob. It is on hold, but I don't know what the DOT is thinking at this point. So, and I agree with you. Most of the feedback I got on the West End, my constituency, was almost entirely negative, maybe entirely negative. But that doesn't necessarily change DOT's mind. So it's still on the stove, but you're right, it's on the back burner.
And also there is this $1.4 million grant that the feds have given the city to consider basically a reimagination of Route 13 between pretty much the high school and Purity Ice Cream. And it's would transform that from the current quasi expressway it is right now into a tree-lined, sidewalk-lined street that would be focused on multimodal transportation. It's quite a reimagination, and this is just a planning grant, not a shovel-ready plan by any means. But there could be some considerable redesign of Route 13 as a result of this $1.4 million study. So that's in the pipeline now. So as that moves to the front burner, the couplet kind of moves to the back burner. But again, the state Department of Transportation often gets what it wants. So we'll just have to see, as George says, where it goes from here.
That's it. That's pretty much it.
All right, thanks, Bob. Okay, 4:07, we're doing well. Agenda items for our next meeting. I think Linda Woodard had a thought. Linda, are you there?
I'm here. Actually, I was just trying to chat with Shauna because from what she said, the CSI funding has been restored by the county. And if that's the case, then we don't need the agenda item. I was going to try to talk about whether or not the municipalities that use them, we were asked to contribute 4,000 and 6 others were asked to contribute 4,000 to make up for that 28,000. But if that's no longer necessary, then we no longer need that agenda item.
Keep your money.
I got plenty of places to put it for sure.
Yeah. All right. Any other agenda items that, yes, Mark?
I'll just follow up on it. I mean, the town of Caroline currently funds CSI for $3,000 per year. So it's interesting. I didn't know if any other municipalities do that independently or not.
You guys get off cheap. I think we give them about 13.
Okay.
And I think we give them about 6 something.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we've got a lot of watershed.
Yeah.
I think the town gives them even more than that.
Great. Good to know.
Okay. So is there any other business for the meeting?
Do we want to consider next month creating that broadband subcommittee that Anna Kellis talked about earlier in our meeting today?
All right, that would be at our December meeting because we don't have a meeting next month. No. And it will be December 17th. It is a week earlier because of the Christmas holiday. That would put us on Christmas. We really don't want to meet on Christmas.
Would we want to?
Probably a good suggestion, Bob. Why don't you forward that to Katrina?
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Other suggestions?
I guess we'll want to have the vice chair position. Yes. So
we need some candidates for the vice chair.
Are we looking for any particular vices?
Well, I don't know. know. What would you like?
I have several, but I'm not interested in the position.
I'll tell you, it is an easy position to have as vice chair and co-chair. The 90% of the work is done for us by Katrina and Michelle when she is there, and her staff. We just pretty much run the meeting, pass the ideas on that we receive, and I'm sure Mark will agree that this is one of the easiest groups to chair.
I agree. Yeah.
Good to know.
And it's fun.
We got a motion to adjourn then?
Great. Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
And we have a second. Mark made the motion, George second. Meeting is adjourned at 4:10 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Have
Good
a
to see you all.
Everyone.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Betty. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you, Betty.